Picture a young actress stepping into a spotlight left empty by none other than Marilyn Monroe. That's just one of many surprising moments in the life of Dame Joan Collins, an icon whose journey from the golden age of Hollywood to global superstardom is full of unexpected twists, fierce determination, and above all, real star power. In this video, we'll uncover lesser-known stories about Joan's bold early roles, the studio politics that thrust her into film leads, and the unshakable spirit that turned her into a true entertainment legend. If you think you've heard it all, prepare to be amazed by the secrets behind her rise to fame and the remarkable career that followed. Grab a seat because these facts about Joan Collins might just change the way you see her forever. From the outside looking in, Dame Joan Collins seems like a figure straight out of a Hollywood fairy tale, a major TV icon, a celebrated film actress, an enduring best-selling author, and a beloved personality in the United Kingdom who has been recognized by the Queen herself. Yet beneath this public image lies a deeper narrative, one woven from ambition, resilience, reinvention, and a keen sense of self-preservation in a notoriously fickle industry. Although many people associate Joan Collins with her unforgettable portrayal of Alexis Carrington Colby in the American primetime soap opera Dynasty, her life and career contain layers upon layers of fascinating detail. The strong influence of her father, who was a formidable talent agent, behind-the-scenes struggles, such as legal battles with publishing houses, her philanthropic ventures, and even some lesser-known tidbits about the roles she almost, and sometimes inadvertently, inherited. In what follows, we'll explore these many facets of Joan Collins' story, weaving in personal speculation and deeper historical context, so that viewers can appreciate how she shaped the pop culture consciousness for generations. Moreover, we'll examine how her unique blend of glamour, ambition, and unshakable self-confidence helped her navigate a male-dominated business, eventually leading to her 2015 damehood bestowed by Queen Elizabeth II. Let's begin with the environment into which she was born. Joan Henrietta Collins first entered the world on May 23, 1933, in London, England. She grew up at a time when the film industry in Britain had limited global reach compared to Hollywood, but it was still a thriving place for theatrical and cinematic talent. Significant changes were happening around her even before she stepped into the spotlight. During her earliest years, Joan's father, Joseph William Collins, loomed especially large in her life. While many young talents in entertainment might have parents who are eager to see them perform, her father did not initially want his daughter to chase the limelight. Why? He grasped the gritty reality of show business in ways that few others did. Joseph Collins was not just any father. He was a talent agent who represented some of the biggest names in popular culture, including the Beatles, Tom Jones, and Dame Shirley Bassey. What's more, his behind-the-scenes role gave him an insider's perspective on how unscrupulous the entertainment world could be, particularly toward pretty young women aspiring to stardom. Indeed, he often told Joan, "You're a pretty young girl. People will try and take advantage of you." That simple statement was not cynicism for its own sake, but rather a protective sentiment from a father who knew the business inside and out. Joseph Collins's career spanned multiple decades and encompassed a broad range of tasks, from serving as an assistant theater manager in Sheffield and Liverpool to finally establishing himself as a pivotal figure in the entertainment world. He even signed major stars like dancer Lou Grade, an iconic name in British television history. Over time, Joseph was known for launching such luminous careers as those of comedian Peter Sellers, actor Sir Roger Moore, and singer Tom Jones. While he was initially uneasy about Joan's budding interest in performing, It was he who recognized her potential and, ironically, helped catalyze one of her biggest roles decades later. In interviews, Joan recounted that Joseph was not overly supportive at first. He needed to see that she had a genuine seriousness and sense of discipline about her craft. Eventually, he relented when she joined the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art, RADA, one of the most prestigious drama schools in the world, where the rigors of study and immersion in classical theatrical training proved that her ambitions were more than just idle dreams. Later in her career, Joseph even played a direct role in nudging Joan to accept the now iconic part of Alexis in Dynasty, demonstrating that he saw the star potential in that role. One aspect that gets overlooked in Joan Collins's biography is how broad her early career was. Long before she rose to megastardom in primetime American soap operas, she was under contract at 20th Century Fox, having caught the eye of studio chief Daryl F. Zanuck. This was a major step for a British actress, as it placed her in the orbit of American Hollywood in the 1950s. The synergy between Hollywood's glamour machine and the British theatrical tradition offered her invaluable exposure, not to mention the chance to make a name for herself among American audiences, her father's dire warnings notwithstanding. Once Joan began working on her own, she took advantage of any opportunity that might further her progress, especially in an era when large studios held a great deal of power over an actor's career trajectory. In the late 1950s and early 1960s, the Hollywood system was still the so-called golden age, but the contract model was beginning to wane. Yet for Joan, signing a 7-year deal in 1955 with a major studio was a massive vote of confidence. Some might wonder why someone with her father's reservations would let her do so. The reality is that Joseph Collins was savvy enough to see that this was how big careers got made, and that his daughter, with her vivacity and polished sense of self, could hold her own. Over the course of the 1950s and 1960s, Joan didn't just star in large promotional pictures, but also developed a robust resume of television guest spots. Audiences who grew up later, in the 1980s, might have no idea that she had cameo appearances or guest roles on numerous shows, like Batman in the mid-1960s, Star Trek in the episode The City on the Edge of Forever, Mission Impossible, Run for Your Life, The Virginian, and The Man from UNCLE. In some ways, these cameo appearances helped her navigate television's early expansion as a medium. By the time she eventually stepped onto the set of Dynasty, she was no novice. She brought decades of experience and an enormous sense of comedic timing, dramatic flair, and an ability to project star power on camera. Another intriguing glimpse into Joan Collins's early Hollywood experience comes from the time she stepped into a role originally earmarked for none other than Marilyn Monroe. Back in 1955, 20th Century Fox had planned to feature Monroe in a lavish period drama called The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, a film inspired by the true-life story of Evelyn Nesbit Thaw, whose entanglement with architect Stanford White and millionaire Harry Kendall Thaw led to one of the most sensational murder trials in early 1900s America. Evelyn Nesbit's glamorous yet scandal-ridden real-life saga, full of love triangles, alleged manipulations, and courtroom drama, was precisely the sort of material a studio might craft into a sumptuous mid-1950s spectacle, drawing parallels to other big trial of the century pictures that were popular at the time. Marilyn Monroe, however, was in the middle of a contentious tug-of-war with 20th Century Fox over her contracts and the types of roles she wished to pursue. She had grown increasingly unhappy with repeatedly being cast in comedic, dumb blonde parts, and was lobbying for roles that would show off her range and intellect. Consequently, as she negotiated for more control over her material and a better salary, particularly in the wake of hits like Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, and How to Marry a Millionaire, 1953, the relationship between Monroe and Fox became tense. According to some accounts, her refusal to take on certain projects or her demand for script approvals clashed with studio executives who believed that, under the old system, they could simply assign any star to any film on their slate. Such disputes were not unusual in Hollywood's waning studio era. Stars like Bette Davis, Olivia de Havilland, and even James Cagney had earlier fought similar battles for creative and financial autonomy, sometimes facing suspensions or legal challenges. But Monroe's fame and her personal struggles made such conflicts particularly public. Early in 1955, as her relationship with Fox hit an impasse, the studio suspended her, a fairly harsh move that effectively barred her from working on their productions and many other mainstream Hollywood projects until they could reach new terms. The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing, conceived as a lavish, provocative retelling of Evelyn Nesbit's life, was one of the casualties of that dispute. Monroe's star power would have lent the film an enormous marketing advantage. Yet with Monroe's suspension, Fox found themselves in urgent need of a new leading lady, and they were keen to keep production moving. Enter Joan Collins, at the time considered a relative newcomer, though she was already under contract with 20th Century Fox, had done some notable roles, and had gained a reputation for being easy to direct, professional on set, and unafraid to tackle roles involving more risque, dramatic, or psychologically complex material. It might seem daring for the studio to hand such a plum opportunity to someone less established than Monroe, but from Fox's standpoint, it was a practical move. Collins was young, alluring, and able to exude a kind of dark, smoldering glamour that could be adapted to the sometimes troubled, sometimes sensual portrayal of Evelyn Nesbit. Furthermore, Fox was operating on the standard contract system, meaning they could slot Collins in without the risk of an outside bidding war for her services. She was already in their stable of talent. The production itself reflected Hollywood's appetite for period pieces that combined romance, scandal, and visual flair. Directed by Richard Fleischer, The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing was designed to highlight not just the sensational aspects of Nesbit's story, the love triangle and the violence, but also to showcase the elaborate costumes, lavish sets, and a sense of early 1900s extravagance. One might note that, while it did not become a monumental classic, it certainly provided Collins with a prominent stage to display her range. She had to convey both the vulnerability of a young woman seduced by an older, assistant charismatic man, and the resilience of someone who lands at the center of a tabloid frenzy. Looking back, this moment in 1955 stands as an example of how fluid star casting could be under the old studio regime. Monroe's departure from the role, rooted in contractual battles, allowed a rising actress like Collins to leap forward into the limelight. And while the film did not necessarily rocket Collins to immediate superstardom, it did raise her profile considerably. Audiences who might otherwise have known her only from secondary appearances or smaller credits now saw her top billed in a dramatic vehicle that had once been meant for Hollywood's biggest star. This shift also symbolized broader transitions in the industry. The mid-1950s was the beginning of the end for the so-called golden age of Hollywood, a time when top stars increasingly fought to renegotiate or end the restrictive contracts that had long governed their careers. Monroe's public battle with Fox was one among many. Some, like her, found it a tough slog, occasionally winning concessions but also enduring suspensions or negative publicity. Meanwhile, emerging talents like Joan Collins benefited from these cracks in the old structure, stepping into high-profile roles if the established marquee names were caught up in disputes. For Collins herself, the girl in the red velvet swing offered valuable experience in headlining a period drama, dealing with intense romantic and psychological themes, and playing a real-life figure with scandal-laden backstory. The learning curve proved essential for her continued growth as an actress. When 20th Century Fox saw her hold her own in a role that required both subtlety and glamour, they realized she could handle bigger challenges to come. In many ways, this episode is also emblematic of how Collins's father's warnings might have come into play behind the scenes. If Joseph Collins was so worried about unscrupulous producers and studio politics, one can imagine that his knowledge of such disputes positioned Joan to handle them more confidently. While none of us can peer into every behind-the-curtain conversation, it's safe to assume that Joseph would have been advising her through the legal complexities, or at least giving her insight on how to maintain composure during uncertain negotiations. The net effect was that she navigated a transition from being a relative unknown to a lead in a major Hollywood production with surprising ease. Critically, The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing drew mixed reviews. Some praised Collins's portrayal of Evelyn Nesbit for her ability to blend innocence and a certain raw allure, while others yearned for the synergy they believed Monroe would have brought. Historically, the film stands as a curious artifact, capturing not only the socio-cultural fascination with fallen women in early 20th century tragedies, but also reflecting the Hollywood star system's fragility. One moment, a studio banks on an A-lister, the next she's suspended, and an up-and-comer steps into her shoes. For Joan Collins, it was more than just a footnote. It was a demonstration that she, too, could command a camera's attention under intense, potentially hostile circumstances. In reading about the film from later perspectives, you'll often find a shared sentiment that The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing is overshadowed by the behind-the-scenes drama of Monroe's feud with Fox. Biographers who detail Monroe's rocky relationship with the studio use the incident to illustrate how the star missed out on a serious, meaty role that might have changed her comedic blonde typecasting. Meanwhile, for Collins, the film might have felt like her first big test, a chance to prove she was no longer just an ambitious British transplant, but an actress who could inhabit a high-profile American project. The performance required her to mirror Evelyn Nesbit's contradictory nature, part naive participant in an older man's game, part cunning figure in the sensational trial. Further context from the archives reveals that Collins spent considerable time researching Nesbit's real-life story, including reading about the Thaw White murder trial, considered one of the earliest cases of media sensationalism in the 20th century. Possibly, the mental preparation also shaped how Collins approached future roles, where the character's moral complexity was front and center, something we might see again in her iconic performance as Alexis Carrington, who likewise thrived on cunning and manipulation, but retained a streak of sympathetic motivation. From today's vantage, the entire scenario underscores how small pivot points can redirect a star's path. If Monroe hadn't rebelled against Fox at that moment, The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing might have been another well-known Monroe vehicle, while Joan Collins might have found a different route to break out. Instead, the film stands as a symbolic juncture. For Monroe, it was a stepping stone missed because of disagreements about her future. For Collins, it was an unforeseen opportunity that set the tone for the versatility and resilience that would mark the rest of her career, from comedic cameo spots in the 1960s to her ultimate triumph in the 1980s television. In short, though overshadowed by the swirl of Hollywood politics and overshadowed in the grand scheme of classic cinema, The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing remains a fascinating historical milestone in Joan Collins's journey. It illustrates how quickly an actress could ascend from contract player to leading lady status when a top star vacated a role. And it points to the sense of adaptability that Collins carried throughout her life, eventually culminating in that unstoppable combination of theatrical skill, on-screen magnetism, personal fortitude, and a father's guidance that shaped her iconic career. Though Hollywood might not have turned her into an overnight A-lister in the 1950s and 60s, her profile kept building. She also had family connections in literature. Her sister Jackie Collins was a prolific author of romance novels. While it's widely known that Jackie soared to fame with bestsellers, fewer people might recall that Joan starred in cinematic adaptations of Jackie's works, including The Stud and the Bitch, bringing to life the character Fontaine Khalid. The success of these movies in the late 1970s put her back on the pop culture radar, especially in the UK, and showcased her as a figure who could straddle the line between erotically charged romance stories and mainstream film. The synergy between Jackie's writing flair and Joan's screen presence created a brand, so to speak, that tested moral boundaries, but also reflected the more liberated, cinematic atmosphere of the 1970s. Then, of course, the phenomenon of Dynasty arrived. A collaboration between Aaron Spelling and Esther Shapiro, Dynasty debuted in 1981 on ABC, intended as a direct competitor to other primetime soaps like Dallas. In its first season, however, it hadn't quite captured the public's imagination, ranking only 28th in Nielsen ratings. That changed drastically in the second season, when Joan Collins joined as Alexis Carrington Colby, the vengeful ex-wife of oil tycoon Blake Carrington, played by John Forsythe. The unstoppable force of her portrayal would catapult the show's popularity to stratospheric levels. Producer Aaron Spelling famously remarked that though they wrote the character, 49 out of 50 possible actresses might have failed in the role. The intangible spark that Joan brought was what turned Alexis into a timeless archetype, a woman unafraid to be cunning, seductive, and unapologetic about her desires. This confident portrayal was also a reflection of Joan's personal style. She knew how to accentuate a sense of glamour reminiscent of 1940s Hollywood divas, combined with the 1980s power-dressing aesthetic. By 1985, Dynasty overtook other shows as the #1 series in the United States. Alexis's clash with Crystal Carrington, Linda Evans, yielded some of the most watched moments in 1980s television. Catfights that made headlines in TV Guide, tabloids, and mainstream news. The success of Dynasty overshadowed many of her prior roles, but that overshadowing came with extraordinary perks. She won the Golden Globe Award in 1982 for Best Actress in a Television Series, Drama, highlighting how her fierce approach to Alexis wasn't just about style, but also about nuanced dramatic skill. Dynasty also refashioned her global image. Having spent years as a guest star or supporting figure in films, she was now recognized as a glamorous leading lady. From being photographed on magazine covers to making talk show appearances, she leveraged this fame to open up new avenues, both personal and professional. And ironically, for all his caution about the industry, her father Joseph was among the voices encouraging her not to turn down that role. One can only imagine how it felt for her to prove to him that yes, she could navigate the perils of show business and come out on top. Beyond acting, Joan Collins has frequently demonstrated her ability to reinvent herself as a brand. For instance, She wrote her first autobiography, Past Imperfect, in 1978, just a few years before Dynasty would catapult her into an entirely different echelon of fame. The success of that memoir led her to continue writing in various genres, from novels to lifestyle books. The world might remember that her sister Jackie Collins' steamy, glamorous novels regularly topped the New York Times bestseller lists, but Joan herself has also penned bestsellers, including Primetime, Love and Desire and Hate, Infamous Star Quality, Misfortune's Daughter, and the Saint-Tropez Lonely Hearts Club, to name a few. While she might be overshadowed by the phenomenon of Jackie's writing legacy, the reality is that Joan carved out a parallel literary path, forging a brand identity anchored in topics such as romance, intrigue, and fashion. Joan's love affair with writing did not always proceed smoothly. One of the more unusual episodes in her literary career involves a lawsuit with Random House. She had been paid a $1.2 million advance to deliver 2 novels, but the publishing company later contended that the manuscript she submitted was unpublishable. They sued her, alleging that she had failed to deliver work of sufficient quality. Joan fired back, countersuing them in a high-profile legal battle that was covered daily on court TV in the United States, an extraordinary example of how show business legal spats can find an enthusiastic audience. Ultimately, she emerged victorious, retaining the $1.2 million. This episode shows that her father's early warnings might have taught her a measure of caution, but they also instilled a capacity to fight back when she believed she was in the right. In addition to her writing, Collins has maintained a presence as a columnist, contributing to or having written for The Spectator, The Sunday Telegraph, The Daily Mail, The Times, The Daily Telegraph, The Lady, and Harper's Bazaar. This impressive array of publications demonstrates that her opinions, especially on topics such as beauty, social customs, or general lifestyle matters, remain in demand. In her columns, she can appear forthright, witty, or downright acerbic. She once told interviewers that writing was a personal release, an opportunity to express thoughts she might not convey in an acting role. However, to limit Dame Joan Collins' achievements strictly to entertainment or writing would ignore another important dimension, philanthropy. While she's best known for portraying strong, even unscrupulous women on screen, behind the scenes she has supported numerous charities for decades. One might say the real Joan stands in stark contrast to the fictional Alexis. She is a longtime honorary member of the National Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children, NSPCC. This British charity, established in 1884, focuses on child protection, and apparently Joan has championed it in multiple ways, from fundraising dinners to public awareness campaigns. She also received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association of Breast Cancer Studies in Great Britain for her consistent advocacy of breast cancer awareness, a cause that resonates widely given how many are affected by the disease either directly or through loved ones. Beyond those efforts, she is a patron of Fight for Sight, a UK-based charity that funds pioneering research into the prevention and treatment of eye diseases, including cataracts, glaucoma, macular degeneration, and many others that can lead to blindness. She also supports the Shooting Star Children's Hospice, now known as Shooting Star Children's Hospices, which offers palliative care to children with life-limiting conditions in London and Surrey. On top of all that, she has financed or overseen philanthropic projects supporting foster children in India for over a quarter century. The extent of her philanthropic involvement gives her public persona a richness that might surprise some fans who only see the diva image cultivated by the tabloids. This philanthropic dimension also dovetails with her recognition by the British monarchy. In 1997, Collins was made an Officer of the Order of the British Empire, OBE, for her contributions to drama, and in 2015 she was elevated to the rank of Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, DBE. She recounted in her typical whimsical tone that she never in a billion years imagined she would be considered for such an honor. At that time, she told the press that she felt both surprised and delighted, recalling how receiving the OBE in 1997 had been a highlight, but a damehood was on a whole different level. This second accolade recognized not just her cinematic or television-related achievements, but also her philanthropic endeavors. When we look at damehood in the context of British society, it's more than just a courtesy title. It's a reflection of how an individual's body of work, spanning artistic contributions, charitable actions, and overall cultural impact, earns them a permanent place in the historical record. For Joan, who overcame paternal skepticism, navigated Hollywood's shifting tides, and built a second act as a TV icon and philanthropic champion, this recognition served as a full-circle moment. In a monarchy known for conferring honors upon diverse figures, scientists, authors, philanthropists, actors, someone like Joan stands out for bridging old Hollywood glamour with unstoppable British spirit. One might also highlight her star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. Achieving that milestone underscores her significance across the Atlantic, showing that her influence is not confined to the UK. The star, placed at 7000 Hollywood Boulevard, cements her place among the pantheon of cinematic legends and reflects how U.S. audiences hold a special affection for her. Often overshadowed by more sensational tabloids or Dynasty headlines, her Walk of Fame star testifies that she was a recognized figure in film long before Alexis Carrington made her an American household name. Additionally, glimpses of her personal life reveal an unstoppable spirit. We have limited space here to delve into multiple marriages or her experiences as a mother, yet these aspects color her entire narrative. She has been forthright about her relationships, divorces, and remarriages, sometimes weaving these experiences into her columns and lifestyle books, encouraging readers to keep forging ahead despite heartbreak or betrayal. If Alexis Carrington exuded unstoppable confidence, it might well be because Dame Joan herself, shaped by real-world heartbreak and triumph, built that confidence from the ground up. One reason her philanthropic involvement might surprise the public is that many only see the glamorous veneer. Indeed, she's often labeled England's most beautiful girl or the most beautiful woman in the world, epithets bestowed upon her by newspapers, magazines, or even admirers within the industry. But behind that facade is a self-driven professional who meticulously planned her career trajectory for decades. We see this from the vantage of how she's chosen roles. For example, after starring in The Virgin Queen, she was tapped to star in The Girl in the Red Velvet Swing. She pivoted from historical pieces to comedic cameo roles in shows like Batman, then to more dramatic arcs in Star Trek, and from there to primetime soap operas. Her career's longevity is almost as remarkable as her initial success. Even after Dynasty eventually ended in 1989 and the 1991 miniseries Dynasty: The Reunion briefly tried to recapture the show's magic, Joan still found ways to remain relevant. She popped up in cameo roles like playing Margaret Rogerton Sykes in The Loss Adjuster or Amanda Savage on Hawaii Five-0. At an age when many in the industry retire, she not only continues acting but also remains a media figure, penning columns or making cameo appearances in fashion events. She's also known to have a comedic streak, as evidenced by cameo roles in sketches for British TV shows or comedic cameo parts in big Hollywood productions. Nonetheless, The unstoppable thread in her public persona is glamour. Over the decades, she's never shied away from discussing her approach to beauty and style, going so far as to publish 6 lifestyle books about maintaining elegance and confidence, such as the Joan Collins beauty book, Health, Youth, and Happiness, My Secrets, My Friend's Secrets, Joan's Way, Looking Good, Feeling Great, and The World, According to Joan. These books fuse memoir-like anecdotes with practical tips about skincare, fashion, diet, and the intangible art of exuding self-assurance. Arguably, those volumes reflect her personal brand. She's never content to rest on past successes, but is always forging new ways to connect with fans and share bits of her worldview. Yet that brand building is not always smooth. We return to the Random House fiasco as a prime example of her refusing to be pigeonholed into what a publisher or a studio demands. The daily coverage of that legal case on court TV signaled that her star wattage was potent enough to attract watchers, even when the subject was contracts and manuscripts rather than primetime catfights. Some older fans recall tuning in to watch the drama of Joan versus Random House the same way they might watch a theatrical soap. In the end, her victory, keeping the $1.2 million advance, highlighted her capacity to stand up for herself in a complicated legal environment, something her father likely predicted she'd need to do. One might wonder about the father-daughter synergy in her acceptance of the Dynasty role, as it has been stated that Joseph was the one who strongly encouraged her not to skip the audition. If so, he might have recognized that after some stints in modestly successful or cameo roles, Dynasty had the potential to define the rest of her career. That paternal guidance ironically stands in stark contrast to his earlier warnings. You're a pretty young girl. People will try and take advantage of you. In the end, that protective fatherly stance mutated into a deeper, albeit sometimes contradictory, involvement. Returning to philanthropic notes, as Dame, she's been recognized not only for her roles, but for the decades she's devoted to championing breast cancer awareness, child welfare, foster programs in India, eye disease research, and hospice care. The synergy of Dynasty's enormous popularity in the 1980s and her philanthropic outreach might have made her an even more potent advocate. Television watchers, impressed by Alexis's cunning, discovered that behind the fictional chaos was a real woman genuinely concerned with issues like cruelty to children or medical underfunding. This dual identity is part of what makes her interesting to longtime fans. She can be brash and flamboyant on screen while exuding heartfelt compassion behind it. The awarding of the Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire in 2015 by Queen Elizabeth II stands as a culminating honor for her philanthropic achievements. She accepted it with an equal measure of humility and witty self-awareness, famously remarking that she never thought in a billion years she'd receive that recognition. Given that she'd previously been recognized with an OBE in 1997 for her contributions to drama, many might have expected her philanthropic track record to yield a higher recognition eventually, but she herself never took it for granted. She stands among a small group of entertainment legends: Dame Elizabeth Taylor, Dame Angela Lansbury, Dame Maggie Smith, Dame Julie Andrews, and so forth, who have navigated the upper echelons of stage, film, or television, and also been recognized by the crown. In that sense, her trajectory exemplifies the multiplicity of paths an entertainer can take. She thrived in comedic guest roles, soared to worldwide fame in an American soap, found her voice as an author, battled in high-profile lawsuits, and lent her influence to philanthropic causes, all while retaining a public image of unstoppable glamour. Even in her elder years, she continues to appear in cameo roles, delighting fans who recall her as the irrepressible Alexis, or even as the fleeting siren from Batman, Star Trek, or lesser-known cameo moments. She stands as a testament to the interplay between personal initiative and the unpredictability of the show business environment. Let's revisit the final part. She's been called England's most beautiful girl and also the most beautiful woman in the world. Those are big statements, typical for an era that prized starlets as either comedic muses or alluring temptresses. But she defied that pigeonhole by not letting her looks be the sum total of who she was. She insisted on forging her path, whether through more dramatic roles, comedic cameo spots, philanthropic missions, or as a columnist. If Alexis Carrington was a role that demanded cunning and the skill to hold an entire show's dynamic in place, Dame Joan Collins was more layered in real life, more giving, yet also as strong-willed as her on-screen persona might suggest. In more recent years, she's picked up roles like Amanda Savage in Hawaii 5-0 or Margaret Rogerton Sykes in The Loss Adjuster. While these might not be as high profile as Dynasty, they illustrate that she's still active, still championing the craft of acting, and still broadening her filmography. Indeed, that is a testament to her unstoppable love of performance. Some might find it surprising that a woman who soared to primetime stardom in the 1980s would remain relevant in the 21st century. But that is precisely what she has done. When asked, "What's your favorite Joan Collins movie?" or "Which role of hers resonates the most?" fans might mention Dynasty, or her cameo in Star Trek, or possibly something more obscure like her performance in The Stud or The Bitch. Others might say they admire her most for her philanthropic efforts, for which she eventually received the damehood. Still others might be drawn to her literary side, referencing the time she overcame the Random House lawsuit. In any case, her broad body of work ensures that each fan can find a different side of her to appreciate. Now let's wrap up by examining once again the significance of that 2015 damehood. Queen Elizabeth II, the longest reigning British monarch at the time, recognized Joan Collins for a combination of philanthropic endeavors and cultural impact. That ceremony put her in the company of other British luminaries who've transcended their initial career roles to become ambassadors of a certain brand of British artistry. It's an indicator that no matter how many controversies swirl around her, and she's had her fair share of tabloids tracking her marriages, disputes, and comedic feuds, she's left a positive stamp on British cultural identity. To conclude, Dame Joan Collins' journey from a father's cautious daughter to a star under 20th Century Fox, from cameo appearances in Batman and Star Trek to the unstoppable Alexis Carrington, from best-selling author to philanthropic champion, is one of the most intriguing arcs in modern entertainment history. And in this era of fleeting celebrity, her story endures as a masterclass in perseverance, self-reinvention, and balancing the pursuit of glamour with heartfelt charitable actions. Through decades of shifting audience tastes from Hollywood's golden age to the golden age of primetime soaps and beyond, she stood out not just for her sultry charisma, but for her belief in her own potential, and at times, for her unspoken desire to show her father that she wouldn't be a naive girl lost in an exploitative business. Indeed, Joseph William Collins turned out to be right. In one regard, the industry can be harsh, but he was also proven slightly off in worrying that she'd be devoured by that harshness. Instead, she conquered it, rewriting her destiny in ways that few could have foreseen, culminating in the ultimate recognition from British royalty. Of course, the final question we might ask is, what's next? Even in her 90s, It would not be shocking if Dame Joan Collins popped up in another cameo, published another lifestyle or romance book, or championed another charity. She has consistently shown that she's not content to retire to a quiet life away from the spotlight. Fans can thus remain hopeful that her journey, both philanthropic and creative, will continue, offering a continued reminder that a strong voice once formed can echo for decades. And so next time you see a rerun of Dynasty or come across an old episode of Batman featuring the Siren, keep in mind there's a deeper story behind the glamour, a story of resilience, giving, defiance, legal drama, family ties, literary ambition, and an enduring passion for show business that has spanned nearly a century. And that, in a nutshell, is Dame Joan Collins.